So today we're going to take a look at a different model and look at vulnerability and gratitude and dealing with the downside in some level of detail, and then just touch on true self, false self, identity work, and then turn into next week, our final week, as we put it all together. Just a very quick summary of the first 2 weeks. And the videos are on the website. If you go on the website and search happiness, I think you'll get to these. I hope that has some connection to happiness and what you do on the website there. Seligman's models of authentic happiness and then human flourishing suggest that you need to have positive emotion, engagement or living in the present, meaning and purpose, and self-esteem and optimism and resilience and positive relationships. We talked about that over the course of 2 weeks, working off of a couple of hypotheses. One is that we were created to be joyful. We were created in that image of God. And secondly, that all people long for happiness, flourishing, and a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. We talked about the strengths in 6 different virtue areas. And again, those slides are on the website if you want to refer back to them, or go to the bookstore and buy the Seligman books. I think they still have a few there. We touched a little bit last week on fear, and it seemed to really strike a chord with several folks, some who mentioned it at that time and some who've followed up with me with conversations since. And so let me just name that one of the great challenges societally, and I think individually, that we have is we are taught, we are encouraged to adopt, we are force-fed a myth of scarcity in our society. That is the storyline that there is not enough for all people to have enough. That if I somehow give some of mine away, I won't have enough. And if someone else has some, then I don't have enough. And that more is better, and that treadmill in which we get on, we just try to accumulate, whether it's wealth or fame or glory or artificialities that are all driven by the false self. And thirdly, that there's this myth storyline that says that this is just the way it is and that it can't be done differently. And of course, we as people of faith embrace a narrative that is grounded in God's salvation history, in God's grace and love for all of creation, and invites us to be a part of that. And so we are called into a different narrative. Because what we know is that fear-driven life is stifling. It's stifling for us and it's stifling for those around us. Fear is a human, natural experience, but often we become ashamed of our fears and by our fears. We'll say maybe a little bit more about that in a bit. The theology of the incarnation, that is that God has chosen to come and dwell among us, consecrates humanity and indeed all creation, and addresses our fear of being alone and says, you are not alone, so let that fear go. And then fourthly, the sin of pride. Pride is really just an original sin expression of fear. Let me just set that aside for a minute. I don't know why I opened up Pandora's box of original sin. Forget I said those 2 words together. Let's just call it pride. Pride is something that we all know as part of our human experience, both within us and with those around us. But it tempts us to believe that vulnerability is a matter of weakness. That vulnerability is that which will cause you to lose. That vulnerability will mean that the myth of scarcity will exact its pain on you. And this is an invitation to say that actually confessing our experience, our living our vulnerability in community releases a healing power And that's what I want to spend most of our time tonight on. So we're going to move away from Seligman's models that we've talked about largely the last 2 weeks, and we're going to look at Brené Brown's model. They are related. They are attempting to do very similar things. But it may be one in which you are able to get the toehold. So this is just another way to look at things. And what she says is that we are created, or we are called into wholehearted living. The notion of wholeheartedness is that you live and breathe life so fully that you are wholehearted in the moment. And the only way to get there is to allow your heart to be broken open, which is where vulnerability is at the core of it. It is the catalyst for courage. It's the catalyst for compassion. It's the catalyst for connection. And without it, we will not go to those places of compassion and connection and courage. It is Brown in her investigation, in her science, declares that it is the single most important predictor of those who will be wholehearted in their life. The ability to be vulnerable. We'll say more about that. They're able to practice being vulnerable not only with those around them who they have some measure of trust, but they're really willing to go out there in their professional lives, in their church lives, in their communities, and to really be authentically who they are and know them to be. And know that the people, what people think of them is not what needs to drive their definition of authenticity. Building upon that, then, is the ability to practice vulnerability within community, which is where the sense of belonging is so critical. All humans need love and a sense of belonging. Those are, again, borne out in Brené Brown's research and many others. And we cannot overstate the importance of a sense of belonging. We want to feel connected to something larger than ourselves, and it is an irreducible need of all humans. Gratitude then builds upon that. Again, we have a sense of that there is something larger around us than ourselves, and it is that for which we become grateful for, and we're aware of the gratitude. And off of that then comes a sense of worthiness in the connectivity that we have. And from there we get the wholehearted living. We'll unpack some of this here across the next 30 minutes or so. Let me just say, she proposes 10 guideposts for wholehearted living. I'm just going to run through these. I've got them printed. I left them in my office, but I'll pull them back out and I'll put them on I've got them listed here, so you can take them home, you can work with them, you can look up, you can journal on them, you can pray over them, you can read her books. Most of that comes from an earlier one, The Risk of Imperfection, I think. Daring Greatly is the one that much of this material comes from. She's got a new one out, Rising Strong? Yeah, Rising Strong. And but I'll have the copies of these 10. But let me just highlight. Cultivating authenticity is one of the guideposts for wholehearted living. That is, letting go of what other people think. Cultivating self-compassion, letting go of perfectionism. Cultivating a resilient spirit, that is, letting go of numbing and powerlessness. We are the most medicated and addicted society in the history of humankind. Cultivate gratitude and joy, letting go of the scarcity myth and the fear of the dark. She has some interesting things to say about that, about our notions of darkness. Cultivating intuition and trusting faith, that is, letting go of the need for certainty. Cultivating creativity, letting go of comparison. Cultivating play and rest, letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. Oh, that one must have rung a chord. Isn't that amazing? I was just telling someone that lives on our street, they're young, they're in their early 30s, they're both professionals. They spent a lot of money on a house and then poured more money into the house, and they're never there. They're never there because they're working all the time. And when we see them on occasion, all they talk about is how unhappy they are with how much work they're doing. I'm not singling them out. I'd see a lot of nodding heads that this is the motif for many of us. And it's why, just a slight digression, when God says, remember to keep holy the Sabbath day, it wasn't that every seventh day you better do this. It was God designed us to have rest. God designed us to take delight in this life and not just work it. And so we've got that opportunity. Cultivate calm and stillness. Letting go of anxiety is a lifestyle. Cultivating meaningful work. Letting go of self-doubt and supposed to. Cultivating laughter, song, and dance. Letting go of being cool and always in control. All right. So what I want to do is return back to this kind of basic foundational element of this notion of vulnerability. You have heard me preach. There's probably not many sermons that I've preached in the 3 years I've been here that didn't have that word in there at some point or another. The invitation, I think, is one of such seismic importance in our invitation to follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, who was the epitome of vulnerability in life, wholehearted living in life. So if we are able to kind of figure that out and recognize that it in and of itself is not the point, it is the catalyst for the experience of compassion and gratitude and courage and connection and belonging and worthiness, then we will figure out how that wholehearted living comes into play. And what I'm going to try to do, hopefully, is show a video of Brené Brown speaking about vulnerability and the myths that we build up around it based out of the fear that we have of if we're going to be vulnerable, we're going to get hurt, which may be the case, but we're still called to do that because the wholehearted living can't get there until we are allowed to be cracked open in some way. We crack the heart open to the possibility of something new. And this video is part of a series that she has. So she may make a reference or two in this segment about something that she talked about earlier. Don't sweat that. It's not an important part. She's got it all self-contained here in its design. What I would like to invite you to do now is, in just a moment, turn with your partner, next door neighbor, someone around your table, and have a conversation. And you can have a conversation about vulnerability generally. You can have a conversation about the video and what your impression was and how it struck a chord for you or didn't. Or if that is just too open-ended, then answer one or both of these questions. That is, do you agree or disagree that vulnerability is the catalyst for courage, compassion, and connection? And share an experience of your practicing vulnerability with others. What I'd like for you to do is to take about just 2 minutes. We're not going to have a long time for this. 2 minutes, and then after 2 minutes, we'll swap. So one person's listening, not interacting, just listening. And then I'll call swap here in a couple of minutes. Okay? Oh, I can see folks are really into this, which is gratifying to see. Let me ask, this video is part of a series that Brené Brown has done. I've talked with the Faith Formation Ministry team about, and I would like to know whether you would have interest in using these as a backdrop for another series, perhaps next spring. The whole series of Brené Brown's, probably be about a 6-week series of as we watch segments of these videos. So a few hands saying yes, a few nods, yeah. All right. I think it's helpful stuff, and obviously y'all are resonating with it as well. Any just 2 or 3 comments back from your breakout sessions? Anything to share for the good of the whole? Yeah, Betsy.
We didn't practice vulnerability in our family of origin, and how very challenging it is to try to repair that or change the tactics when you still have your children around to work with.
Yeah. Could y'all hear? She said in her family of origin they didn't practice vulnerability. I actually thought when she said it's the professional thing, I thought she would say, I'm a doctor, I don't practice vulnerability, because I know it's really hard for doctors to practice vulnerability. And what do we do with our family systems as we try to do it differently for the next generations? Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Teresa.
So this is just not quite flowing into that, because one of the things that I think that I've been doing in my life is being vulnerable where it's not likely to be a good experience. Where you know, come up with this vulnerable, but then people have shown that they're not capable of receiving that in any way that comes back in a good way to me. But I keep doing that, and I have actually, before this class started, kind of been saying, you know what, don't keep casting the pearls before swine, or don't keep, you know, trying going where the cheese isn't, or because if I don't actually find the whole vulnerability thing all that difficult. But what I do find difficult is saying, you know, that's not I don't need to be where somebody doesn't like me or doesn't treat me well or whatever. Just go, you know, probably they're gonna feel the boost of lacking me. And that's been actually a good thing to, you know, bring it to places like this where it's more likely to result in a flourishing. So it's a little shift on that.
Thanks for
Because I don't go around saying, oh, no, I'm a doctor, you know, I can't. You know, but there are a lot of people that really, you present a vulnerability and they say, yeah, you are weaker, and now I see how we can, you know, tread on you some. And so that's not a good, don't stop doing that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, thanks for being a place for the vulnerability, where it's likely to flourish.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Teresa. Yeah. And I should say, parenthetically, not about your comment specifically in your experience, but generally along those same lines, that this model of vulnerability leading to wholehearted living is not an invitation into perpetuating abuse. I didn't hear you say that specifically, but it's... We're about to turn to the notion of gratitude with all of this, and this doesn't mean be grateful for your dad getting drunk on Friday night and beating you up. That's not what this is about, right? So vulnerability is that catalyst, that it is the bedrock for all of this, and I'm utterly convinced that it is central to our understanding of what being followers of Jesus Christ is as well. We may dwell on that a little bit more. But for now, let me turn on to belonging. We've made the case for, hopefully, and we'll say more about that. But let's turn to gratitude and think about how are we living in the moment in a way that invites us to be grateful for what's there. Some of you may know the writings of Benedictine monk David Steindl-Rast, who is really a remarkable writer on the area of gratefulness, as he says, gratitude and gratefulness. He says it's not joy that makes us grateful, it's gratitude that makes us joyful. You may or may not agree with that. I think it has a compelling ring to it that the work of gratitude is the work that we have to do in order to experience, if we're back to that other model, the experience of joy and positive emotion. And with that as a backdrop then, I want to, only because I can't really unpack it as well as she does, I want to show another segment of the video, if that's okay, and say that this is on gratitude. Let me say she will reference a notion of foreboding joy in this, which is from another segment. But the notion of foreboding joy is that when you just are having a great time in life, you have this foreboding sense that it is just about to fall out from under you. You know what I'm talking about? She actually, I think, references the notion of the other shoe, waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's going to happen? That we somehow have bought into this myth of scarcity so convincingly that we think that when we have joy, it's not natural and therefore it can't last. When in fact, the practicing of gratitude helps us figure out how to perpetuate it in our lives. So this one is about 12 or 13 minutes long on gratitude, and then we'll have another chance to converse, and then we'll wrap things around to close out. All right. So can we share for about 2 minutes each on your handles? Would that be it? All right. So here's what I'd like for you to consider. Choose one of these questions or something else in terms of gratitude. These questions actually come from David Steindl-Rast on gratefulness. Who has gone before you in your work for whom you are grateful? When has someone given me the right help just when I really needed it? What dream lives on in me? How can I make a difference with anything I have that others need? Who has inspired me to live wholeheartedly? What is enough, and how do I know it? All right. So we'll ask you to hold it just really to 2 minutes each, and then we'll come back together and close up. All right? Let me see if I can make the turn here just in the last couple of minutes that we have. And this quote from Neville Ward is just such a remarkable one to me. It sums it up that it is our conviction that life can be made meaningful and holy. Thankfulness consecrates it, makes it meaningful and holy. Jesus and his friends were brought up in a world of thought in which to bless a thing and give thanks to it were one and the same. The idea is familiar in Christian tradition in grace before meals. The meal is blessed, that is to say, made holy when God is thanked for it, right? But life is also blessed and made holy when it is received with thankfulness. And so the charge for us is to be grateful. To be grateful in the moment. And I would charge you, as myself, this week, see how you might practice that. And be aware of it. Again, as she said, not just an attitude of gratitude, but really practicing gratitude. And see what that has in terms of bearing on your life and in your outlook. And then let me just say, as we turn into next week, I'll give you a little sneak peek. A quote by Richard Rohr. Isn't it strange that Christians worship a God figure, that is Jesus, who appears to be clearly losing by every criterion? And then we spend so much time trying to win and succeed and perform. We even call Jesus very losing the redemption of the world. I think Christians have yet to take that message seriously. Religion has largely become holding on instead of letting go. God, it seems to me, does the holding on to us. And we must learn the letting go, which I'm convinced is part of this wholehearted living. So with that, just a minute or two worth of questions, comments, conversation. Any parting thoughts? Yes, sir.
I'm not looking forward to the end of the year of Mark, because to me Mark's gospel is all about that. This is the Jesus who was uncertain, who had difficulty, who chose, who was rejected, and that's Mark's gospel.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. So, Mark's Gospel, the year in which we are currently reading Mark's Gospel, into the whole lot of uncertainty, vulnerability, and loss, and what are we to do with that? Thanks. Yeah.
There was a slide earlier, and it just struck me that the sacramental rites of reconciliation and anointing of the sick are both rites of vulnerability and asking belongingness, asking community to help as a whole. So that maybe is a connect the dots to Christian life in this concept.
Yeah, thanks for that. And even our corporate confession of sin in the worship service every Sunday.
Exactly.
Is that. Yeah, good. Yeah.
When we started this conversation, one of the things that I really struggled with the first day was feeling like it was all about sort of me. It's all about sort of how I feel or how I practice, or almost. And you warned us about this is not this kind of meat-based theology or successful kind of sort of orientation in our theology and stuff. But the thing that really struck me both last week and then clarified, I think, today in terms of thinking about gratitude, is that for me being grateful is when I really see someone else and who they are. So it's less about me and more about recognizing and acknowledging the other person and seeing who they are, and that requires them to be vulnerable. So I suppose it requires me to be vulnerable to that as well. But it's a different look at what this is, just for me as I look in, but more what it means to us as a community. And I think we're getting it. Maybe that's what we'll do next week in the wrap up. But there's a piece of that to me is only full if we're really in community.
I don't know, come back and find out. He's got the last word. Actually, I have the last word, didn't I? So, this is great stuff, and the energy that I get from y'all is just a rich blessing, so thank you for that, and I hope it is a helpful exercise for you to be here as well. And I feel the community here. I feel it, and so bless you for that. Again, if you have time to help break down, we would appreciate that, and if not,